Hello everyone, and welcome to How to Little Cup Draft. I'm Self Seraph and I'm here with Harry.
Hey, what's up, guys? It's Harry here.
Yeah. So basically, the whole summary of this little episode thingy is to basically teach you guys, first of all, what's the difference between Little Cup and like the rest of Pokemon. What's the difference between Ladder Little Cup and Draft League Little Cup, and then like all the interesting things to make you, well, a lot better at it than you probably were if you didn't know anything. So feel free to take us away with the first topic.
Okay, so the first thing we wanted to talk about really was the difference between Little Cup, Ladder, and League, because they can obviously be confused with each other quite a lot. Because, Little Cup just kind of gets grouped into one topic. But basically, the biggest difference between Little Cup, Ladder, and League is probably the 2-item limit there, which means that each team can only actually have 2 Eviolites, 2 Berry Juices, 2 Scarfs, and you can't actually go over this limiter. So, Scott, why is this very important?
Okay, so apart from the fact that you're probably limiting the amount of sturdy juice users, it also means that stall is, well, non-existent as a thing, for a variety of reasons, but basically not having the bulk to take enough hits does come into play. But it also forces players to play a bit more dynamically and build their team around what are the best Scarfers, what are the best dedicated walls, what are the best berry juice users, rather than just sticking an Eviolite or a berry juice on everything that fits.
Yeah, definitely. And it definitely makes Pokemon like Mienfoo and Vullaby, which can use any item really, it makes them a lot more valuable to a team. And also Pokemon like Abra, which are mostly going to be wanting to run Focus Sash, because it's probably the best item for Abra, whereas like any other Pokemon in the tier doesn't really run Focus Sash. So it probably makes those kind of Pokemon, which can kind of use anything, way more valuable.
Agreed. And it's also thinking about the Mons which use items that are not standard as well. Like Cubone has its own sort of mini niche as well, with using a thick club, because it kind of takes away from the need to use like Life Orb or something.
Yeah, definitely. The other biggest difference to our ladder is that you can use any Pokemon. So usually on a ladder team, you would see six of the best Pokemon on a roster, which is usually like Foongus, Vullaby, Mienfoo, those sorts of teams. Whereas obviously in League, you can't use that many Tier 1 Pokemon, so you've got to definitely go into the lower Pokemon, which makes stuff like Bonsai and Skitty and Munna, stuff which you would never see on ladder. It makes them way more valuable.
Alright, and so to explain for that, we've currently got some of the old tiers. We kind of nicked these from Lil Cup Wi-Fi Season 2 of the APA. We are moving to points, just to clarify in future, which is a discussion for another time, but generally speaking, the way in draft that it worked is you tend to have 1 to 2 of the best Mons, and then somewhere between 2 and, say, 6 of the 2 middle sections, and then, again, the same 1 to 2 of the lowest section. So it kind of pulls a lot of your team towards the average Mons. So when you're building a team, it's kind of thinking about where is the best value, more than anything else, I think, as well.
Yeah, definitely. So some of the most premium tier 1s are probably Mienfoo, Vullaby, Abra, Diglett, those sorts of things. But definitely, when you're thinking about draft, you're not going to want to always pick up the best tier 1, because that means you're not going to be able to get the best tier 2. So maybe looking at maybe like a Chinchou or a Bunnelby or a Doduo, something like that in tier 2, may be more valuable than just getting the best tier 1.
I think it's worth noting again that there tends to be like 2 major things that I search for when building a draft. The first of which is how versatile is a Mon. So is there more than one set that I can bring? And basically I'm not relying on this specific one set every single week. Or alternatively, if it can only bring one thing, like if it's only got one set that is just good, how good is that one set, and like how reliably do I want to be bringing that one set.
Yeah, definitely. You want to be picking up something that you can bring every single week and do something amazingly every single week, or you want to be making something that is completely well-rounded and you can use it to do anything.
I think a good example of that, the difference between the two is, okay, I say something like Bunnelby is something that does the same thing very well consistently, and that it's more often than not a Scarfer, and it just clicks Frustration or Earthquake, and that's all it needs to do. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, definitely.
More often than not. I mean, there are Life Orb sets that are run and a few other things, especially if you have speed control, but we'll talk about that later. But on the flip side, you've got something like Scraggy, perhaps, or Dwebble, which have several sets that are perhaps even equally terrifying.
Definitely.
So with Scraggy, you've got both Dragon Dance, Bulk Up, you've got a defensive sets, you've got like Rest, Shed Skin sets, which can be also horrifying. So things like that. And then Dwebble, obviously, you can just go full-on weak armor hazard stacking, or you can go for the whole Shell Smash. Pretty much.
Yeah, definitely. So that they're definitely two archetypes which you will be looking for to draft in League. But yeah, moving on to the next topic. The next thing we wanted to talk about is the difference between Standard League and LC League. So definitely one of the big factors that makes people turn off from LC League is the experience. Whereas it's not that much different. Once you are able to learn the Pokemon which you can use in Little Cup, and the items and the moves which are most valuable in Little Cup, it's definitely a lot more like Standard League than people would first thought.
Yeah, it definitely comes down to knowledge more than anything else. It's just how well you know the Pokemon that are being used. And if you're someone who's played a lot of ladder, especially Little Cup ladder, you're not going to really know the best way to adapt to a Little Cup draft, because you won't be seeing certain Mons and you won't really know what they do. For example, common mistakes are typing of things. So, for example, Skrelp, people forget, is not a dragon poison, it's actually a water poison. Or Seal is just mono water rather than water ice. I believe there's a few others out there that are not really the typing people think they are, and it kind of throws them off.
Yeah, definitely. I think definitely one of the biggest mistakes people make is thinking Bunnelby is actually a ground type, whereas obviously, no, it's just a normal type in Little Cup, and that can sometimes throw people off.
I think another thing to consider is like the way that you're playing. And if you're a really experienced battler, this shouldn't be too hard to adjust, but the way that you play in Little Cup, you've got to remember that, okay, yeah, there are a few Mons, especially those with Regenerator, so Slowpoke and Fungus, and to an extent Mienfoo, that can consistently take hits. There is nothing that is like truly defined as a wall, per se, in Little Cup. It's... well, everything tends to die within 2 to 3 hits on average, I'd guess.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so...
Yeah. So unless
speed
you've
of the
set
game's
up,
too.
most of the Pokemon in the tier will die very, very quickly. So that's something that definitely makes Stool a lot worse in the tier, just because, first of all, you can't run more than 2 Violites, and then second of all, everything is just too weak anyway, and most people are definitely going to run setup, so it definitely makes Stool worse in the tier. And
to carry on from that, the fact that the majority of the good Stormons, so we're looking at, again, Fungus, Gothita probably, I guess, to an extent, things like that, yeah, Slowpoke, Marini, a lot of them are all tier 1s, so the chances are you're only going to get 1 or 2 of them, and not, like, all 6. Which
yeah,
it basically limits what you can do.
There's there's definitely quite a big fall off from tier 1 to tier 2. Most of the premium Mons are going to be in tier 1, and they're most of the Mons which you're going to see on the ladder itself. Whereas when you go into tier 2, tier 3, there's a big fall off between each tier, and a big fall off of how often you'll see one Mon going into the next.
Absolutely. Especially I think tier 2 to 3 is a bit more wishy-washy, but 1 to 2 and 3 to 4 especially are there's a massive drop off. 1 is the stuff that you're going to see all the time. 2 is the stuff that you'll probably see maybe 1 or 2 of on most teams on ladder. 3 you're rarely going to see, and 4, if you ever do see some of this, it's because they've probably built the entire team around it.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so I think that's probably enough from that point of view. I think now we can start moving on to stat distributions in Little Cup and how they are different to stat distributions in Standard. Do you want to lead off this?
Okay. This is very different to what you might expect normally. I'm just going to quickly go and bring up the list here. I've held it somewhere in here. Excuse me here, just to bring it up. Okay, so number of EVs required for stat gain. It's very different. You can't just drop 252 EVs on every single thing. It's unfortunately not gonna work. It's very inefficient. The way that it works in Little Cup is your base stat, the second number in your base stat, is kind of where you want to go from this, and that's the number in the left-hand corner that I'm showing on screen at the moment. And then the numbers that are to the right of that show for each single point of stat distribution that you want to go up by, this is how many EVs you need to put in. So for example, looking at, say for example I've got a base 50 statmon. If I wanted to move it up by 1 point, I need to add 36 EVs. If I want it up by 2, it's 116. And if I want it by 3, it's 196. So it's very precise numbers. You can't just wiggle waggle, oh sure, let's throw 63 here. I don't know why you do 3 anyway, because obviously that's not how it works. But yeah, you can't just throw in any random number into a stat and just go, sure, that looks right. It's very limiting in one sense, because you can only move it up by a maximum of 4 points, depending on the stat. But also at the same time, it's kind of liberating because there's a lot less to worry about. It's a lot easier to creep opponents' stats, etc. Do you want to say a little bit on?
Yeah, I think when you're definitely trying to learn more about LC, your best friend is probably going on Smogon, seeing what they've commented about the sets, seeing why they put the exact amount of HP stats or the exact amount of speed stats in a Pokemon, seeing why they do everything they do, and then once you do learn more about how to EV and IV stuff in Little Cup, I think then you can start doing it yourself, making sure that you've got the exact amount of HP stats you want in something to live a hit. Say you're using a Lowland Grimer and you want to see how much HP you need to live 2 Leaf Storms for a Snivy. Your best friend is probably going on Smogon, seeing what their set does, seeing why it's used this way, and then jumping on Calculator and making sure that you EV a Pokemon in the exact way you want it.
Exactly. So yeah, you basically want to just look at this sort of thing and go, right, this is exactly what I want. So thinking of that, let's talk about things that are very important, like specific stat numbers that come up and why they're relevant. You want to say a bit about things that aren't relevant, and then we can go on to things that are?
Okay, so stuff that isn't relevant. Well, I think probably saying the stuff that is relevant is probably more important. I think definitely 19 HP on Pokemon using Life Orb, I think is probably one of the most relevant stat numbers that you can get, because obviously Life Orb takes 20% recoil on your Pokemon for each hit you use, and if you have 19 HP, it's only going to take 1 recoil as opposed to 2. So that's definitely one of the most relevant ones. I think another relevant one you have is for Snivy, if you wanted to use something like HP Fire, you can't actually run 17 speed because it takes a full 250 speed EVs into Snivy's speed stat, and it takes 31 IV stats. So if you're trying to use HP Fire, which takes 30 speed IV stats, it's not going to work.
Yeah, exactly. And also, like, thinking about different speed tiers, I guess, whilst we're here, and saying, like, how contested certain speed tiers are. I know 17 speed is, like, probably the apex speed tier that's contested. I think a lot of Mons get it, so, you know, it's quite iffy, and that's why we'll get onto a bit later why speed control is quite important.
Yeah, definitely.
I think you also said that there's one attack stat which does exactly the same as something else.
Yep, so 15 and 16 attack stats in both attack and special attack, will be exactly identical. If you hop on a calculator and you put in a Mienfu with 15 attack stat, and then you raise that to 16 attack stat, you'll notice that the rolls are the exact same, and it's always better to run 15 or 17 attack than 16.
So, there you go. Don't do that. Yeah, I think we've kind of covered the major points there, I guess. Talking about different EV productions. Yeah, points there. Shall we move on to the next topic?
Okay, so I think the next most relevant topic is probably the items.
Yeah.
Usually on a Little Cups team, you will see a Violite and Berry Juice being run. And then I think probably some of the other items which will be good to run, it's probably Life Orb or Scarf.
Yeah.
We'll talk about later why speed control is so important, but Life Orb in Little Cup is definitely underappreciated because the huge 1.3 boost in attack is very relevant, especially in Little Cup where the HP stats of every single Pokemon are so low. So Life Orb is definitely underappreciated. Do you want to talk a bit about the berries being used in Little Cup?
Okay. So basically, if you've got about 20 HP, you want to be running Berry Juice 100% of the time. If you're going to be using a berry. Because Berry Juice restores 20 HP, which means, effectively, if you've got 21 HP, you're going back to full health. Which is also important to note, that if you're trying to build, like, really something bulky, and you've got a sturdy ability mon with Berry Juice, you're not going to be able to bring yourself back to full health if you have more than that as a HP stat. So, think about that. Also, the differences with other berries that you're using, I mean, obviously things like Custap are a thing that you might want to try, obviously, for that priority. But Oran and Citrus Berry, there's a major difference. Oran Berry just restores a flat 10 HP, I believe. So it's a lot more reliable, whereas Citrus restores, what does he say, 20% of your max HP? So, generally speaking, in Little Cup, you're not really restoring that much in comparison to an Oran Berry. Especially in Draft, when you've got the 2-item limit, I'd probably recommend only ever taking Oran Berries once you've maxed out your Berry Juice limit. And the same with things like a Violite, I would consider moving to something like Assault Vest if you're pushing for a specific Spadef build after you've maxed that out. But generally speaking, they're the main defensive typings. You said a little bit more about Life Orb, but obviously remember that your HP stat is like nothing. And we'll get onto why priority is so important too, but Life Orb does give you a lot of bonuses in attack, meaning you can obviously do a lot more damage because of how multipliers work and stuff, but the fact that you're going to be losing 1 or 2 HP every time you click an offensive move, especially one that's not, perhaps doesn't go the way you want and doesn't do that much to a wall, for example, you're going to be wearing yourself down a lot quicker, and times I've just I don't know, they've hit a move into me and I've recovered it with Berry Juice, and then they've hit me again and I've gone down to 1 HP again, and they've already knocked off like 2 to 3 HP or something like that. I can just turn around and hit them with like a Mach Punch or something, and they'll drop. So you really need to be aware of how much HP you're going to be putting yourself on as well, especially if you're using Life Orb. Things like Scarf are really important too, because speed control does win games in Little Cup. It is really important in Standard, but in Little Cup, speed is probably one of the most important things. You can say a bit more if you like.
Yeah, so speed is very important in Little Cup, especially with how prevalent setup is, which we'll be talking about soon. But yeah, speed, especially with everything pretty much maxing 17 speed, only a couple of things go higher than 17, but with the speed stats so similar in pretty much the whole tier, it makes scarfing, it makes priority, it makes stuff that is actually faster than 17 speed way, way more important.
Yeah. So basically, if you've got webs or other speed control, you're gonna be finding games a lot easier. Or if you're gonna be having a lot of mons that are, say, like, just to put it in this way, Diglett is 20 speed, I believe, right? 20 speed?
Yeah, 20 speed.
It's 20 speed, okay? If you scarf a Diglett, I think there's only one mon that could ever outspeed that, just off the bat, and that's in Sun Ponyta, I think. Is that about right? Something like that? Or something?
Yes. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so basically, it's extremely fast. You got to be thinking about like where you're going to be hitting. If you're hitting 17 speed regularly, with a Scarf, you're hitting, what, 25?
Yeah.
But you've also got to be remembering that people with base 17 speed anyway are the most likely things to be scarfed.
Definitely. Things like Snivy, things like Picky Peck,
Mm-hmm.
you know, they're the premium scarfers. They're the scarfers you're going to be having to watch out for, definitely. Anyway, I think it's probably about time to move on to the next topic, which is setup moves. Most importantly, or most notably, Shell Smash and Belly Drum.
Not to say that things like Sword
Belly
Stance
Drum. Okay, Shell Smash and Belly Drum. So yeah, these are definitely the most important ones in Little Cup. On ladder, you're probably going to be seeing Belly Drum, Zigzagoon, Belly Drum, Magby, the majority of the time.
You might see Poliwag.
Shell Smash is probably... Yeah, maybe on ladder. And then for Shell Smash, you're going to be seeing Clamperl and Shelder quite a lot. Those are just probably some of the best. Clamperl hits insanely hard with Deep Sea Tooth, and Shell Smash. It's going to be OHKOing most of the meta if it gets a Shell Smash up. For Belly Drum, you've got Magby, which is insanely strong. It has Mach Punch as priority, which is insanely strong in Little Cup, and that's going to be one hit KO.
I'm just going to put a point out here that okay, Magby is right. Think about how oppressive a +6 attack, +1 speed generally, because they'll run Flame Charge as the stab fire move, generally speaking, and then Mach Punch to clean anything that outspeeds them. Okay, that is extremely oppressive in draft where there are not many counters. Now, Zigzagoon is worse because extreme speed is all it really needs. It just belly jumps and extreme speeds and can destroy anything with pretty much in the entire meta, which is why in draft, if it's not banned, you need to be asking some questions why it's not banned, because I think the only thing in testing so far is a full HP Skiddo that has managed to beat it 1v1.
Yeah, Zigzagoon is insanely strong, and in the majority of the time, you're either going to see Belly Drum on it banned, or you're going to see it banned, because there's nothing that switches in on a +6 E-speed, and there's nothing which outspeeds it once it gets a Belly Drum up. It's just going to be KOing everything on your team, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, and like it's even worse because you're just like, oh, we'll just run a Ghost type. Yeah, Zigzagoon's not even that slow, and it'll just run Shadow Claw. Like, most of the ghost types in this meta are not that fast, bar Ghastly mainly, or like the mini Pumpkaboo. Like, they're gonna get smacked by it anyway. There is a reason Zigzagoon is banned.
Yeah, Zigzagoon is OP. And then Shell Smash on the same note, you've got Shelder, which has an insane defense stat. With a Violite, it's going to be taking any hit you throw it its way, and then it gets a free Shell Smash up, and then you're not going to be able to switch into anything because it has multi-moves, which will always hit 5 times. It has the ability which makes Icicle Crash just destroy everything, or Icicle Spear, destroy everything on your team.
Yeah, if it doesn't if it resists Icicle Spear, it probably doesn't resist Rock Blast.
Yeah, and it has priority in Ice Shard. There's just nothing that's going to be able to switch in and take a hit once it gets a free Shell Smash up. And then the other one is Carmpo, as I've mentioned, with Deep Sea Tooth. There's nothing that's going to be able to switch in, and it's going to be too fast. And you're not going to be able to deal with it unless you have priority. And
the next, obviously there are things like, so the next 3 that I'd say are the next best Shell Smashers are Tortuga, Ormanite, and Dwebble, all for the same reason in that they get sturdy, which generally means that if they're playing it right with Endure, they're going to be getting a free Shell Smash off, like, pretty much guaranteed. Dwebble especially because its type, it's not particularly weak to anything like 4 times or anything like that. Like, it's not weak to common types. So yeah,
definitely.
It's
going to get a free Shell Smash up, and they're going to be able to destroy your team if you do not have the priority options that is necessary for you.
Which basically comes to the main solution off of that. Priority is, like, it's up there as some of the most important things in Little Cup. Like, if you know Meowth just fake out into feint, it just destroys a lot of offensive threats by itself. Like, just a Life Orb fake out into feint, or a normal gem fake out. It's just brutal. But the point being that when you get into a situation where it's Shell Smashed or Belly Drummed, you need priority. Sucker Punch isn't going to cut it for one reason in particular, especially in that if they outspeed you, their own priority is going to just make your Sucker Punch do nothing. So, for example, Magby, the reason why it's so strong is because it can get to +6 and Mag Punch. And the reason why Tortuga is one of the better Shell Smashers is because it can get to +6 and Aqua Jet, or I think there's Ice Shard on Shelder as well. Like, the fact that they have this ability to get to +2 in speed, +2 in attack, and then use priority moves if they need to, it's just very oppressive, so you really need to be getting things like Fake Out, Extreme Speed to shut them down.
Yeah, definitely. So, probably the next thing that we can talk about is prominent abilities that you'll be seeing in Little Cup. I think probably the most common ability for high-tier threats in Little Cup is Regenerator. Mienfoo gets it, Fungus gets it, Marini gets it, Slowpoke gets it. It's an insane ability that you're going to be seeing on most of the Tier 1 Pokemon, and there's nothing you can really do about it, because in Little Cup, 33% every single time you can switch out, which is going to be the majority of the battle, is too strong, and they're going to be able to switch out every single time, get all their HP back, and you're going to be back to square one. So that's why Regenerator is probably so good in Little Cup. Some of the other abilities that you might be seeing are Weak Armor, Contrary, Sturdy, Technician, just to name a few off. Technician, obviously, is going to make Fake Out, Feint, all of those moves way more powerful, especially on Meowth, where this is the most relevant. It's going to be insanely hard to switch into anything that uses Sturdy. When combined with Berry Juice, means that you're going to be able to get back to full freely, especially when combined with Enjure. So hazards can't even stop you from going back up to full freely.
Don't forget Recycle as well in tandem with that. Like, constantly being able to come back.
Especially on threats like Magnemite, which have such a high attack stat. When you're able to get up to 3 fall freely with Endure, Recycle, Volt Switch. It's insanely hard to switch in, it's insanely hard to kill Magnemite, and it's a huge threat in the tier. Then obviously you've got weak armor, Pokemon like Dwebble, Pokemon like Vullaby have this ability. It just means that if you do get a big hit on them, they're just going to be able to get the boost in speed, they're going to be able to outspeed you next turn, they're going to kill you most likely because Vullaby is insanely strong, Dwebble is insanely strong, and it's a great ability for that reason. And then you've got Contrary.
I'd like to make a point about weak armor, especially in countering it. Multi-hit moves.
Yeah.
You pick a mon that's going to live, and like before you trigger it, hopefully, and you hit it with multi-hit moves. Because it's going to drop it down to the least amount of thing possible if it lives. So it's going to be like -6 defense or something. Well, -5, yeah? And then, sure, they kill you. Whatever. You then bring like any mon with a priority move and it's dead. If they don't switch.
Yeah, definitely.
So...
yeah, I think multi-hit or priority moves are probably going to be the go-to strat for killing weak armor threats. The last ability which I wanted to make a note of is Contrary. Things like Inkay, Snivy, probably most notably, Fermentis get this ability. It's just going to make killing them an absolute nightmare. Leaf Storm, where you get a +2 boost every single time you click it, 120 base power, is insanely strong. If you let it get set up, it's going to end your entire team.
Superpower as well, though, on Inkay. Like, people... right, a lot of the threats in Little Cup are physical mons. The majority of Little Cup mons will be physically orientated. The fact that you can get a +1 defense boost from clicking Superpower is really good. Like, it makes it incredibly hard to revenge it with a physical move, which the majority of priority things are physical. So, if you drop webs and they bring in an Inkay, you've just given them +1 speed, and then they superpower, and now they're at +1, +1, +1. You're like, shit, the only priorities I can really use against them that are special to counteract the whole defense boost are Vacuum Wave. Oh wait, it's a Psychic type. Like, it's also dark, but like, it's neutral on it. It's not going to just completely obliterate it the same way that other moves would. So, it does make it a threat. You said about that's the kind of abilities you want to talk about. There's a couple I want to add to that. So you've got like Arena Trap / Shadow Tag on Diglett and Gothita especially. Like, you do need to plan around that. There is an awful lot of momentum moves like Volt Switch U-Turn. There is quite a lot of them, but if you don't have them, they're really good at just eliminating them. I know a lot of electric types in this format like to scarf themselves. And if they just bring in a Diglett or a Trapinch onto your Scarf Volt Switch, you've just lost that electric mon. Another ability that I wanted to go into were weather setting abilities, especially the ones that set Hail or Sun. They're broken because there's so many teams that can be based around weather teams. There's Prankster as well, which can help set weather, or just get a free T-Wave, which can help things. And then Alolan Diglett has a real niche as well, with its Tangling Hair, meaning that you can -1 to anything that hits. So if you just run a Focus Sash, you can get that speed drop on something you need to revenge it. But the most important set of abilities that haven't already been discussed are immunities. Like, the way you're playing Little Cup is hyper offense. Like, there's offensive or hyper offensive. There isn't really walls. They don't particularly exist too much. So you're going to be hitting fast and you're going to be hitting hard. That's just the way it is. And a lot of the things you're going to be relying on is natural type defenses and type immunities to take hits. I think one of the key battles that I've done myself is the fact that I had 2 water types, but I also had a ground type and an electric type with Volt Absorb, or Lightning Rod. So it basically meant that as much as they wanted to click an electric move on my water types, they couldn't for the chance that I would switch into it. And it's the same with things that have Sap Zipper, or like, for example, Ponyta has Flash Fire. and then obviously the natural flying, being immune to ground, etc.
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, those are definitely some good abilities that you picked up on. I think another prominent one, which you kind of noted on, is Drought for Vulpix, which is unbanned in League. On ladder, I know it's banned, but in League it's unbanned, and it's definitely one of the big threats. It gets Solar Beam, insane fire moves with Sun Up, and it can be very difficult to switch in on. But yeah, I like all the abilities which we did mention there. So I think the next thing we can kind of move on into is hazards. So obviously, all the hazard options that are available in Little Cup are spikes, toxic spikes, webs, and rocks. Obviously, rocks and spikes, as in regular League, are important. I think that damage every single time you switch in, which is going to be very relevant in Little Cup, where it's constantly a switching out metagame, I think are very important. But I think the most notable of the hazard options is definitely sticky webs. Do you want to quickly mention about the sticky webs and why it's so important?
Okay, so rocks are great, spikes are great, toxic spikes are great. And they all have one major thing in common, is that if something has a sash or sturdy, they can knock it off that and basically, put them into a range of an OK where you'd need it. Great. Why are webs better? Well, webs, in a lot of cases, are the difference between your 17 speed mon outspeeding their 17 speed mon and winning the game. It's a lot of cases to say, will your fake out outspeed their fake out? Will your Scarfer outspeed their Shell Smasher when they're only at +1 rather than +2? Or the same with weak armor, for example, on some of the grounded weak armor mons. Will you be able to still outspeed them with the Scarfer when they're at +1 rather than at +2? Will you be able to slow down their Scarfers so that they don't have that Scarf boost? So basically you can outspeed them with things regularly. And then it also means that your opponent's reliance on priority increases because of the speed gap. It is basically, in sum, the difference between do you get swept or not a lot of the time.
Yeah, definitely. Speed is probably one of the most relevant things in Little Cup, with the options of webs, scarf, trick room, icy wind, speed boost, priority options. I think hitting the enemy before they hit you in such a one-hit KO environment as Little Cup, where it's completely different to League, I think speed is probably one of the most relevant stats. In every single game you go in, you're going to be wanting to run the max speed on Pokemon you can run, unless they're all about defensive or they're going to be setting up Trick Room. You want to be running the maximum amount of speed possible, and you're going to be wanting to hit them harder and faster than they can hit you.
I mean, the amount of times I've lost games to speed ties, webs are just the go-to. It's the way that you knock it back. You don't lose to a speed tie if you've got webs up, and they don't. But that also brings me on to like ways to prevent or to counter webs. So obviously you've got Natu's extreme niche in Magic Bounce. You've got Rapid Spin and Defog, obviously, as your removal options. But you also have things with Contrary and Defiant, which you basically go say, you want to drop me by 1 speed, you're either going to gain me 1 speed, or you're going to give me +2 attack. Is that something that you really want to do, especially when I have priority? And then there's something that most people tend to ignore, but using something like Magic Coat, I believe the move is, especially if you don't have webs, and they do, you're not necessarily going to stop them getting up webs, but you're going to make sure they've got webs on their side too, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, definitely, if you can't beat them, join them, is what I like to say.
Yeah.
So if you can't stop them from setting up webs, just make sure you set up your own webs to counteract theirs.
Yeah.
That's definitely one of the better options that you can have to counter hazard spam. So let's move on to the next thing which we wanted to talk about, which is speed control. We've briefly mentioned on most of these things, but let's go in depth with first of all, speed boost. Why is it so relevant in Little Cup, and how do you beat it in Little Cup?
Okay, well, to start off with, most Mons that have speed boost are running Protect. Partially because they don't want to be faked out. But otherwise, as soon as they get to +1, they're now generally on level with your Scarfers or beating them, depending on which Mon it is. But for a lot of cases, it's the moment they hit +2 or more speed is the moment where you are almost solely reliant on either A, having the priority to beat them from that point, or B, making sure that you have a Mon that somehow lives the hit. And you'll also note that, at least from the Gen 7 meta, this will obviously change coming into Gen 8, but the majority of speed boost units will have a Z move to counter the main things that would resist its major stabs, and they'll be used as cleanups. They're just incredibly important because they can add speed to themselves without giving the risk of giving you a boost like Webs would.
Yeah, so the two most prevalent speed boost users on ladder are Torchic and Carvana, which are both insanely strong, insanely fast with speed boost, and they can one-hit KO most of the meta, and they're insanely hard to switch into. Add another one onto that list, Yanma, which we do allow in League. It's insanely strong. Air Slash and Bug Buzz will OHKO, if not 2-hit KO, the majority of the meta. Is going to be insanely hard to switch into. And with speed boost, it's going to be insanely hard to outspeed if you do not run the priority options necessary to take them out. The next thing I think is probably relevant to talk to is Trick Room. There's some very good Trick Room users in the tier. Things like Spritzy, things like your Mask. They're going to be able to come in, they're going to be able to eat a hit, they're going to be able to get a Trick Room up, and they're going to be able to hit you before you can hit them, which is probably the most important thing in Little Cup. The setup options available... the setup options that are available to Trick Room users are like Nasty Plot for Spritzy. They're just going to be able to hit you way harder, and you're not going to be able to eat the hits, and they're going to be able to kill you.
Okay,
do you want to quickly talk about... quickly talk about some of the other options available?
I mean, I just wanted to make a little note on Trick Room's importance as well. Right, so in major... in standard leagues, yeah, Trick Room's good, but it only lasts 5 turns. In Little Cup, 5 turns is a lot longer than 5 turns is in standard. 5 turns can be the difference between you winning the game and you losing the game. So, you know, speed control is important, and if you're winning under Trick Room, it's more in your favour than it would be in standard. But yeah, other options. So generally speaking, you've got a bunch of moves. You've got things like Icy Wind, which is probably the most common of them. Which obviously is an ice type move. Ice type's pretty good in Little Cup, I guess. Dropping their speed by 1. You've got Electro Web, which is a move you probably won't see too often. Which does pretty much the same thing, but it's electric type. Obviously using things like T-Wave, Nuzzle, or Glare will paralyze and half their speed, which is incredibly good. You also have options like the exclusive to Spinnerack, you've got Toxic Thread, which basically means that if you drop that on something and they don't kill you, you can kind of guarantee webs if they don't have priority sort of thing. Just because that toxics them and drops their speed by 1 as well. And then something that people tend to overlook, especially with a lot of the lower tier mons, because it's a move that you'll generally never see in standard ever, and that's String Shot, because that does lower their speed by 2, I believe. Is that correct? Yeah. 2. It lowers their speed by 2. Which, if you drop a String Shot on someone who just smashed on you, they're only +2, and they've got -2 in both defenses. The trade-off isn't that bad then.
-1 in both defenses.
Yeah, -1 in both defenses even, yeah. But they're basically the only major gain they got from that was equivalent to an SD with a drawback.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, String Shot I think is very relevant. you can string shot something on turn 1 or whatever. Say you're using Swaddle, you can string shot them. You will most likely outspeed them the next turn, and then you can set up a free sticky webs or whatever, and make sure that always goes up. So yeah, I think that's probably enough from that topic. We can start talking about Z moves right now, which will be relevant until Sword and Shield comes out at least, and we'll see how that goes after that. But in Little Cup, we use a free Z move clause, which means anything in the tier can use offensive or defensive Z moves, as long as they are not omni-boosting. Omni-boosting Z moves are banned, but anything in the tier can use Z moves. Do you want to talk about why that is so important?
Well, okay, first of all, why Omni Z moves are banned is because, unlike on Ladder, there's a lot less you can do about something like a Bulbasaur using Z Celebrate or Z Trick or Treat Pumpkaboo. But yeah, so basically, Z moves being free means you're a bit more scary. Now, in general, they don't actually do too much more than major moves because of how low the HP is. But where accuracy is an issue, they definitely secure kills. When the fact that you get a lot of wild rolls in Little Cup, having some consistency from a Z move, being able to just turn that, 60 to 90% into a, you're going to KO this, is always a reassurance. But I think the major thing to note about Z moves is the non-offensive Z moves. Z moves like on Mienfu being me first, for example, being able to just grab that +2 speed, and suddenly it's gone from, it's just a bulky attacker to now, we're screwed, because this is a +2, one of probably the strongest offensive Mons with the typing in the game. Please help me. Sort of situation, I guess. But also things like, Z Sunny Day, or Z Weather in general, but Sunny Day generally speaking, because the amount of sun abusers. You might see Z Rain Dance if you're running something like Mantike, but that +1 speed that it gives them, and then setting the weather, really helps propel things. You might see like the more accurate stuff from like Z Sleep Powder occasionally, I've seen. Things like that. But otherwise, generally 2-turn moves, Z's like Bounce, something you'll probably see more common. Like Z Bounce, Carvana, Mienfu.
Another one I think you can probably touch on is Z Memento, especially for Katoni. It can be very important. You can lower their attack stats and then getting something at full health, usually something like a Shelter. You can get a free Shell Smasher as they are -2 on both attack stats, and you can sweep the rest of the game. I've never seen something use Z Memento as well as Katoni, since it does have the Prankster ability, which means that it's always going to go off first. So it's very important on a Pokemon like that. I also think something like Wingull, which uses very low accurate moves, something like Z Hurricane from Wingull's special attack stat will one-hit KO the majority of the meta. There's not anything that you can really switch in on a Z Hurricane into a Scald or a Z Hurricane into a regular Hurricane. It's insanely strong. There's nothing that's going to be able to switch in and take 2 hits.
Also take into consideration things like Z Snatch as well, like being able to steal someone's Shell Smash, or if you're facing up against, a Bidoof or a Woobat, who obviously get double the amount of boosts from Carmine or Curse or Swords Dance, and you just nicking that, like that can really turn the tide, because you're also getting the boost from it as well.
Yeah, definitely. Alright, so I think we can now move on to the final topic that we have, which is premium types and premium moves. So, first of all, let's talk about premium types. I think some of the best types which people will want to grab are fighting types and flying types. Especially for LC, just the moves that they use are so spammable. Like high jump kick, for instance, you could pretty much use that against everything in the game. Most fighting types get knockoff too. So if they're going to switch in something like a psychic type, which may take a fighting type move well, or maybe a ghost type, then you can just slap them with the knockoff next turn. It's always going to hit, it's always going to do a bunch of damage, and it's always going to do what you need for it in a Little Cup.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about why flying types are so good?
Okay, right. So fighting types are amazing if they're the top fighting types. The bottom fighting types, their effectiveness drops whether they don't have knockoff or Stone Edge or something. Flying types are generally universally good, not only because they can just dodge ground type attacks and obviously not be trapped by things like Diglett or Trapinch, but generally speaking, there is not much that takes a Brave Bird or an Air Slash in the Little Cup meta at all. It's just so abusive, and the majority of flying types are either fast already or can be scarfed to the point where they are still fast. And when it comes down to it, you're like, okay, well, I really wish I have an Ice Shard here, because they can be very abusive, I guess. A lot of flying types like Doduo or Pikipek also get knockoff as well, which is probably the most important move in the Little Cup meta, I guess. Because definitely. Items are so
being
important.
Able to knock off an Eviolite, which is a +1 defense and +1 special defense for doing absolutely nothing, it's going to be very, very valuable and vital to knock that item off, especially Sturdy Juice users as well. When they combine the likes of Recycle, it's going to be insanely hard to kill them if you do not have a knockoff option available on your team.
And just for those people who just go, oh no, this thing doesn't have knockoff, yeah, some things won't have knockoff, but what they will have is either Thief or Covet. Now, these are just as good as knockoff sometimes, especially if you don't have an item or have lost your item, because they just do the same thing except steal it rather than obviously knocking it off. And also something to consider is things that have got like pickup as an ability is really weird, but when you're generally using knockoff quite obsessively, being able to just nick their Eviolite, especially if you've lost your own, is like really good. But back to important types, Steel and Normal are also really good. Steel because there's like 5 of them, and they resist Normal, for one. And then Normal's effectiveness in Little Cup goes up like substantially. Fast Normal types, especially with things like Fury Swipes or other multi-hit moves. I mean, there's a reason why we banned Apon's Tail Slap, because the fact that it hit at such a high base power, ignoring Sashes and Sturdy, that it just wrecked things. So, do you want to talk a little about why normal types are the best?
So definitely normal types are insanely good in Little Cup because of the priority options they have available. Most of the normal types in the tier, such as Glameow, Meowth, Bunnelby, they're going to have priority options. They're going to have Fake Out. They're going to have Quick Attack. They are faint, and it's insanely difficult to switch into 2 attacks when they're going to be coming from Meowth, which has a very high attack and special attack stats, and mixed with Technician, nothing is going to be able to switch in and survive a Fake Out into a feint, or a Fake Out into an Aerial Ace, or a Fake Out into a Water Pulse. It's insanely strong, and they just have way too many options available to them.
I think there's one Mon that generally takes a normal type's Fake Out into X, like almost every time, and that's Hone Edge. I think that's the only one that can do it.
And obviously, only one person in the league will have Hone Edge, so
yeah.
It just makes Pokemon like Meowth, Glameow, Bunnelby, it just makes them even better and way more valuable to pick up.
And especially if you have one of those with Hone Edge, it also means that you're stopping the opponent's normal types. Especially the ones that don't have knockoff access. I mean, obviously things like Glameow do, and Apom, but while it is weak to knock, it's not something, because of its high defense stat, that's going to particularly care that much. And it does carry Sacred Sword, so Hone Edge is probably one of the best counters to it. But otherwise, normal types can be so abusive because there's so few steel types, to be honest.
Yeah, nothing really entirely switches into a normal type move, and it's very scary in a league where there's so few steel and so few ghost types available to the user.
And just to clarify as well, whilst yes, rock does also resist normal types, but steel isn't taking the same from a random water pulse that normal types for some reason have that a rock type will. Like using a Glameow or a Meowth to fake out to remove that sturdy that a lot of rock types have, and then water pulsing them will just obliterate them, because most rock types again have a higher physical stat than they do a special defense stat. So
yeah, like Onyx for instance.
Yeah, so that's why normal types aren't so bothered by rock types as they are by steel types, and they're so oppressive because there aren't so many steel types.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that kind of concludes the video then.
Oh, there's a couple more types that we do want to go over.
Okay.
Just real quickly, poison and bug for the same reason, in that, okay, yes, they are weak to flying. It is an issue, but they are the types that resist fighting the best. Having a good poison type is like what will stop you being ruined by a fighting type. Especially something that keeps its item, like Grimer or Trubbish, because it also means that the fighting type can't just knock you either. But yeah, so that's pretty much it.
Yeah, so hope you guys enjoyed this video of us briefly explaining Little Cup.
Well, briefly is an hour, but if you sat through this all, we hope it was enough. We hope you learned something, I guess, from this about how like Little Cup works differently, how to get better at it. Yeah. Yeah.
Hopefully the people, because there's quite a lot of people that are new to Little Cup, they're still learning what is good and what isn't good. I hope that like a video like this will help people. They can just look at the timestamps that we'll have available. They can go through the video, see what they might need to look at, and some stuff they might need to skip over because they already know about it. It's just the type of video which you can sit down, listen to as you're doing something else, maybe like homework or something like that. You can listen to it, you can have it going on in the background, and if there's something that you have to question us about, we'll definitely be looking at the comments of the video. So just ask us, we'll get back to you as soon as possible. If not, just send us a Discord DM.
I'm Silver Seraph.
Happy to help you.
Yeah, for the record, I'm Silver Seraph on Discord, and you're CallMeHarry. So message one of us too, if you can find us. We'll probably put our Discord details in the description as well, just in case. Yeah, that sound good? Cool.
Sounds good.
Thank you very much for watching, everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Later, guys.